On June 28, 1969, in Greenwich Village, New York City, something happened that would impact the world for decades to come. The Stonewall Inn was a gay bar run by the Mafia in Greenwich Village. Most patrons of the Stonewall were homeless teenagers and young LGBTQ+ people. The Stonewall ran without a liquor license, but served mostly soft drinks and watered-down alcoholic drinks. Most of the other gay bars in the village had been raided and shut down by police. In the early hours of June 28th, the NYPD force raided the Stonewall Inn, which was a very common thing that happened to gay bars. This was the second raid on Stonewall in 1 week. There was something that set this night apart from all the other raids that had happened in the past. The patrons of the Stonewall fought back. The raid happened without a warning. Most of the patrons at Stonewall were allowed to leave the bar without being arrested. When they left, they stayed outside of the Stonewall Inn. A couple of the patrons and employees were arrested, mostly for laws against wearing clothing that was typically worn by a different gender and selling liquor without a license. After a few hours, everyone was cleared out of the inn, but stayed outside to watch what would happen. A large crowd began to gather. People from all over Greenwich Village gathered outside of the Stonewall. When one woman, Stormy DeLavery, a drag king from the Jewel Box Review, complained that her handcuffs were too tight, she was hit on the head with a club by a police officer. According to bystanders, she shouted, "Why don't you all do something?" The crowd started to riot. They overturned police cars, threw makeshift bottle bombs at the police, and graffitied the walls of the Stonewall. The police officers locked themselves inside of the building, hoping to escape the riot. Instead, the Stonewall Inn was set on fire by the crowd standing outside. The police managed to escape from the burning building unharmed. Many Stonewall patrons were arrested for resisting arrest, assault, and other crimes. After Stonewall, protests and riots were held outside of the inn for around a week. Most of these were led by LGBTQ+ activists Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, who were both trans women of color. Word of the riots spread all over the country, and as a result, various colleges and organizations held protests and marches. On June 28, 1970, a year after the Stonewall riots, the first official Pride Parade was held on Christopher Street in New York City. It was organized by the Gay Liberation Front, which was an LGBTQ+ rights group. Many LGBTQ+ activist groups were formed as a result of Stonewall, such as Star House and GAA. There were various protests and marches held for a long time after Stonewall, and many people were finally becoming more accepting of the LGBTQ+ community. In 1973, homosexuality was taken off of the list of mental disorders by the American Psychological Association. This was a huge change in the world's view of LGBTQ+ people. While progress was being made all around the world, a new illness was on the rise. In 1981, various reports of what was then referred to as gay-related immune deficiency, or GRID, in 5 young gay men popped up. This disease spread all over the world in very little time. Its first cases were mostly spotted in homosexual men, but as more cases of GRID appeared in people that weren't part of the LGBTQ+ community, the name was later changed to AIDS. In the 80s, the equal rights progress for LGBTQ+ people kind of disintegrated due to AIDS. Many gay people were blamed for the epidemic. During the 90s, a new generation was emerging. This generation believed that LGBTQ+ people should have the same rights as others and be treated equally. But there were still many acts of violence and hatred towards the LGBTQ+ community. In 1993, President Ronald Reagan passed the Don't Ask, Don't Tell Act. Previously, LGBTQ+ people were prohibited from serving in the military. This act allowed LGBTQ+ people to serve, but were prohibited from coming out. This act was finally repealed in 2011, meaning that you were now officially allowed to serve openly in the military. In 2004, Massachusetts became the first state to legalize same-sex marriage. They were followed by several other states. In 2015, President Obama legalized same-sex marriage in all 50 states. This was a huge step towards equality. Many states began to pass hate crime laws regarding sexual orientation and gender identity. By 2018, there were only 4 states that didn't have this law, including Indiana. The Indiana state government is now trying to pass a law prohibiting transgender women and girls from playing school sports on teams that match their gender identity. Many states have laws banning transgender people from using bathrooms that correspond with their gender identity too. Although we still have a long way to go, LGBTQ+ people are more accepted and have more rights now. Many kids and adults feel comfortable coming out at work, school, and home due to a more accepting environment for LGBTQ+ people. Thank you.